Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the subcommittee at any time. I'd like to welcome everyone today to the hearing entitled An Overview of the Budget Proposal for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration for fiscal year 2017. And I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. The first and perhaps most important point that I want to make today is that NASA is a worthwhile investment for the taxpayer and for our nation. Space is as important to our future as were the frontiers of land, sea, and air that we faced in the past. NASA's mission to explore outer space and to use outer space for the benefit of our nation and for mankind is an endeavor worthy of a great nation, which we are. NASA is an agency. Its employees and contractors deserve our praise. I represent the 36th District of Texas and the home of the Johnson Space Center. I can say from personal experience talking with the folks out at Johnson that regardless of the budgetary and policy differences in Congress and within the administration, they are very passionate and are dedicated to NASA's mission. Unfortunately, this administration has once again done a disservice to NASA, its employees, and our nation by providing a budget request that ignores the budget agreement, requesting mandatory funding for NASA. I had hoped that the administration would demonstrate leadership by proposing a realistic budget, but instead we were presented with a list of unfunded priorities. The administration has also once again disregarded the priorities of previous bipartisan NASA funding bills that the President signed. For example, even if we include the so-called mandatory budget request, the budget proposal cuts the Space Launch System, or SLS, and Orion Crew Capsule by $840 million, and the Planetary Science Division by $133 million. Without the mandatory funding, SLS and Orion are cut by $1 billion. Planetary Science is cut by $261 billion. This is not acceptable. This is a budget that takes our human spaceflight program nowhere fast. This budget undermines our space program and diverts critical funding to lower priority items. I have been and continue to be concerned that the support in Congress and at NASA for the SLS and Orion programs is not matched by the administration. The administration consistently requests large reductions in these programs despite the insistence of Congress that they be priorities. Orion and SLS are strategic national assets and must be sufficiently funded. Proposed cuts to the Planetary Science Division are equally disturbing. The pipeline for outer planet missions has been woefully under-prioritized. It is critical that our nation maintain a robust outer planet exploration program. Already, the effects of this diminished cadence are being felt. To keep their staff employed, planetary science institutions increasingly seek funding from foreign space agencies to compensate for the lack of projects. This results in transference of valuable skills and knowledge out of the United States to countries like China. Experienced planetary scientists are also transitioning to other fields, while young scientists are choosing to not enter the field at all, gutting our national capacity in planetary science. This is disturbing and unacceptable and just plain bad for America from many viewpoints. It is important that NASA maintains a balanced portfolio of science activities. Unfortunately, year after year, this administration has requested disproportionate increases for Earth science activities that are already funded by more than a dozen other federal agencies. This year, the President's proposal seeks to increase the science budget by $111 million, a 6% increase. This amounts to a 70% increase since 2007. If this money had been put toward our human spaceflight program, I don't think that we would be spending hundreds of millions on Russian launch services. The request also dilutes NASA's existing Earth science research portfolio by conducting other agencies' work. It is developing climate sensors for NOAA and land imaging capabilities for USGS. And while NASA certainly has the expertise to do this work, they don't have the budget or the requirements. NOAA is tasked with maintaining operational climate measurements, and USGS is tasked to maintain Landsat measurements. This budget makes NASA the piggy bank for other agencies. That must end. If NASA is tasked to do other agencies' work, it should do so on a reimbursable basis, as it does successfully for other programs, such as the Joint Polar Satellite System and the Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite System. Our nation has been spacefaring since 1958, only 58 years. And while we have accomplished great things in these 58 years, there is so much more to learn and to discover and to put to practical use for the benefit of our nation and for all mankind. But we as a nation will not be leading this journey unless we adequately fund NASA's human space flight and planetary science missions. Other nations such as China are working overtime to displace America and become the global leader in space exploration. The consequences of America getting it right or wrong are not immediate, but they are enormous. The rules are going to be made by those countries that are on the surface of the moon and Mars, not those that have stayed home. I want to thank Administrator Bolden for his testimony, and I look forward to a robust discussion. Thank you. And now I recognize the ranking member, the gentlewoman from Maryland, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Babin, and thank you for calling this hearing to examine the fiscal year 2017 budget request for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. I'd like to start by joining you in welcoming our good friend and inspiring leader and exemplar of public service, Administrator General Charlie Bolden. Thank you, General Bolden, for your service to our nation. And we are very fortunate to have you at the helm of our nation's space agency for your consistency, your steadfastness. Mr. Chairman, our space program is a shining example of what we can accomplish as a nation when we harness the talents of our workforce and the capabilities of our industry, academia, and international partners. The fiscal year 2017 budget request for NASA is $19 billion, a 1.3% reduction from the enacted appropriation for fiscal year 2016. And I would like to say that I was very pleased with that enacted appropriation. And so while this proposal is a good starting point for the administration for this morning's discussion, I hope that we can at least get to the $19.3 billion level that Congress appropriated for NASA in fiscal year 2016. It's a gentle dance that we do every year. I'm pleased that the request proposes to revitalize our nation's aeronautics research activities with an exciting initiative to use X-planes to demonstrate technologies leading to cleaner, quieter, and more efficient aircraft. Demonstrating and applying advanced technologies is important to maintaining our competitive edge and sustaining the significant economic benefits that commercial aviation provides. And I'm heartened that the request proposes increases above the levels provided in the fiscal year 2016 appropriations for the Safety, Security, and Mission Services account, which, among other things, provides the funding to operate NASA's field centers, including the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. I'm also pleased that the request would sustain a robust science program composed of research and data analysis grants and small and medium and large missions, including development of high-priority missions such as the James Webb Space Telescope, the Wide Field Infrared Survey Telescope, the Europa Clipper, the Mars 2020 rover, and the Solar Probe Plus missions. NASA's science programs are furthering our knowledge of our home planet and opening new windows into our universe. And if humanity is one day to extend its presence beyond Earth, we will need the scientific understanding to do just that. We'll also need to take a series of steps along a pathway involving technology development, demonstration of operational capabilities, and development and testing of exploration systems to make that move. And while NASA has developed a Journey to Mars strategy that provides an initial outline of a pathway to Mars, We shouldn't have to say it again, but we need a baseline roadmap and structure to support such a multi-decadal endeavor, and we need that now. Such a roadmap would help put in sharp focus the impacts of the proposed reductions to the Space Launch System and the Orion Crew Vehicle, a combined 22% from the fiscal year 2016 enacted level, would have on making progress toward the Humans to Mars goal. Frankly, I'm a little bit puzzled by the deja vu we're experiencing with the proposed reductions to the SLS and Orion programs. I share that concern that the chairman has expressed from the levels Congress appropriated just this past fiscal year in 2016. Even more puzzling and somewhat concerning is a continued talk of targeting an internal date for the first crewed Orion and SLS flight and the EM2 mission in 2021, when the resources being requested are actually geared to a 2023 date, and so that needs some explaining. The Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel raised caution about this kind of approach in its 2015 annual report when it said NASA has briefed the ASAP on measures that appear to be making safety trade-offs in order to maintain a 2021 EM2 launch schedule. The ASAP went on to say, while the desire to fly crew on Orion as soon as possible is understandable, NASA is building a long-term exploration program, and adjustments to the near-term schedule or mission content that result in far safer systems can be an advantageous trade. Mr. Chairman, I know that you and I and many of our colleagues here this morning want to get to Mars sooner rather than later, but we must establish an enduring system that will get us there and back safely time and time again. To do so, we need to ask ourselves some important questions. Will Congress and NASA be able to establish the budgetary and programmatic discipline required to meet this goal? Will this committee and the Congress be true to providing the funding, stability, sustainability, and constancy of purpose that we and others have said are critical for NASA as we prepare to transition to a new administration less than a year from now? How will we navigate the bifurcated 2017 budget request, including both mandatory and discretionary funding, to provide the necessary stability? And Mr. Chairman, we owe our next generation a vibrant space agency in partnership with industry, academia, and international partners to continue its historic mission and to pursue the goal of one day sending humans to the surface of Mars. The future is now, the choice is ours, and it's up to us to ensure the future of our space program is a bright one. I want to also acknowledge the presence here today of our future. Kendra Wood, who's an intern in my office and a graduate of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. She is a superstar, and we owe it to her generation. Also to our visitors from Spelman College, a senior at Spelman, Antonia Hill, who's visiting with us here today. And so let's keep these young people in mind as we talk about the future of space, and I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. I now recognize the chairman of our full committee, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Administrator Bolden, welcome and glad you're here. Mr. Chairman, this committee has demonstrated time and again that U.S. leadership in space is a bipartisan priority. I believe that many of the hard-working scientists, engineers, and innovators working at NASA share our interest in ensuring America leads the world in space. There are some areas of agreement between the committee and the administration in NASA's fiscal year 2017 budget request. But this proposed budget continues to tie our astronauts' feet to the ground and makes a Mars mission all but impossible. This budget cuts funding for human exploration by nearly $1 billion and robotic exploration by almost $250 million. The budget request once again underfunds the Space Launch System and Orion programs. This administration cannot continue to tout plans to send astronauts to Mars while strangling the programs that will take them there. The administration also attempts to redistribute funding within NASA's Science Mission Directorate. For example, Jupiter's moon Europa is one of the most promising destinations we have in our own solar system for finding life beyond our planet. However, this year's request of only $17 million for the Europa mission is incredibly disappointing considering the mission's potential. This represents roughly a 90% reduction from the fiscal year 2016 level. However, support for other priorities, such as the James Webb Space Telescope, the Transitioning Exoplanet Survey Satellite, and the Wide Field Infrared Space Telescope, is encouraging. Missions like these, as well as the search for exoplanets and signs of life in other areas of our universe, captivate the American public's imagination. Overall, though, there is a lack of balance in the science account request. One of the most glaring examples is the disproportionate increase in the Earth Science Division receives at the expense of other science divisions in human and robotic space exploration. This represents a 70% increase for the Earth Science Division since the fiscal year 2007 request. Over the same period, NASA's overall yearly budget has only increased 20%. The Earth Science budget request is 42% more than the Planetary Science budget request. In fact, the Planetary Science budget request is a reduction of $113 million over last year's level. The Earth Science request also is more than the Astrophysics Division, the James Webb Space Telescope, and the Heliophysics Division combined. There are 13 other federal agencies involved in Earth science research, but only one that is responsible for space science and exploration, and that's NASA. This budget also proposes $223 million to fund the uninspiring asteroid retrieval and redirect mission. On April 15, 2010, the President directed NASA to conduct a crewed mission to an asteroid by 2025. Then, with the 2014 budget request, the administration changed course and directed NASA to redirect an asteroid to orbit the Moon and then visit that asteroid in lunar orbit. Then last year, NASA decided to only remove and redirect a boulder from a larger asteroid. Originally scheduled for 2017, then 2020, this budget request now slips the first robotic launch to 2021. The crewed encounter will also slip to 2026 and more likely later based on SLS mission requirements. In practical terms, the President's own budget delays the arm beyond the next administration's second term. All of NASA's advisory bodies have criticized the project. International interest is absent. The scientific community is unimpressed. The administration continues to push this mission on NASA without any connection to a larger exploration roadmap and absent support from the scientific community or NASA's own advisory committees. It is NASA's responsibility to provide a compelling plan for space exploration and execute it. It is Congress's responsibility to ensure NASA's budget is prioritized and funded. This committee will continue to do everything in its power to support American leadership in space. Mr. Chairman, before I yield back, let me compliment Administrator Bolden, because I think he is a committed public servant. I think he is doing the best job anybody could do under the circumstances, and I have a hunch if he were writing this budget, it might vary slightly from the administration's proposed budget. You don't need to respond to that, Administrator Bolden. But we all have our different priorities. But this is simply to say that I appreciate the job that you're doing and continue to be impressed with your sincerity and dedication. With that, I'll yield back.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I concur. I now recognize the ranking member, Ms. Johnson, of the full committee for a 5-minute statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me comment before my time starts on how pleased I am to hear those remarks from my chairman. And I really agree with him, and that's extraordinary. Let me say good morning to everyone and to acknowledge that I have a student here with me today, Adia Moss, who is a senior at Spelman, and hasten to say that I appreciate the long and distinguished service to our nation and your steady leadership of NASA, General Bolden. We know that this is a challenging and exciting time in the agency's history. I know how passionately you care about the nation's space and aeronautics program, and I look forward to hearing your testimony today. Today's hearing marks the beginning of the committee's consideration of the President's fiscal year 2017 NASA budget request. The $19 billion budget request is a strong endorsement by the President of the important role that NASA plays. We send budgets out of here for a lot less, and then we complain about what the President is doing, which is to them a lot less. This is not to say that this is perfect for a NASA budget request, but I do agree with all the elements of it. It is a good starting point. It is Congress's deliberations. It is our responsibility to send what we feel is a responsible budget, because it is what our focus should be today, what we want NASA to accomplish and what we are willing to invest in NASA to do it, so that we can achieve those objectives. It may be tempting for some of us to spend our time criticizing the President for what they consider shortcomings in his budget request, but I think it's not a good use of anybody's time. The President has submitted his NASA budget request to Congress. It is now our job to determine the funding that NASA will receive and the policies it will follow. If we fail to do that, we will have no one to blame but ourselves. That said, there's much to recommend in this NASA budget request. For example, I'm excited by the Aeronautics Initiative. I know the important role that aviation plays in our economy and our society, and NASA's R&D has long provided the underpinnings of new capabilities in aviation. I'm also pleased by the investments made in NASA science and technology activities. History shows us that these investments will pay dividends and increase knowledge and new technological capabilities. On the other hand, I'm disappointed that the funding for the Space Launch System and the Orion spacecraft, the systems that are essential elements of the nation's future human exploration initiatives, have been cut in this budget request. We can change that if we wish. Such cuts add just one more challenge to those already facing the team of dedicated men and women who are working so hard to turn these exploration goals into reality. I would anticipate that Congress will reaffirm its support for SLS and the Orion by the time this year's funding deliberations are complete. Which brings me to one final observation, namely, we will have a new president by this time next year. I know that there are those in NASA who feel the pressure to accomplish as much as possible on the new exploration systems before a new administrator takes power. That's understandable, but it can wind up doing more harm than good. In its latest report, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel has raised concerns that perceived schedule pressure, whether external or self-imposed, can lead to excessive levels of risk being taken on in order to try to meet arbitrary deadlines. That's not the path to a sustainable or a successful program. I hope that NASA management and workers will heed the ASAP's concern and not defer needed testing or make overly optimistic commitments in a short-sighted attempt to keep those programs alive in advance of a new presidential administration taking power. To all those NASA and contract employees, I would simply say, Congress supports SLS and Orion and Commercial Crew, and we will continue to do so, no matter what we say here to make the news or the record. We will do this in spite of a new president taking office. We know that what we do actually is rocket science. So take time and the testing needed to do it right. With that, Administrator Bolden, I again want to welcome you. I look forward to your testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you. They have called votes, so we're going to move right along here. I'd like to introduce our first and our only witness today, and that is the Honorable Charles F. Bolden, Jr. General Bolden has been the administrator of NASA since 2009, and he's a man who has devoted his entire career in service to our country, and I thank him for that. Prior to becoming administrator, General Bolden served for 34 years in the Marine Corps, including 14 years as a member of NASA's astronaut office. General Bolden has traveled to orbit 4 times aboard the space shuttle, including the flight that deployed the Hubble Space Telescope. General Bolden has several honorary doctorates from a variety of prestigious universities and received his bachelor's in electrical science from the U.S. Naval Academy. I would add that General Bolden and I share the honor of having our sons graduate from the U.S. Naval Academy as well. His son, Shay, is a naval aviator currently, and my son, Leif, was a Navy SEAL. Now, let's hear from General Bolden for the next 5 minutes. Thank you, General.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And to you and the members of the committee, it's indeed a pleasure and an honor to discuss with you today President Obama's $19 billion fiscal year 2017 budget request for NASA. And as I had to do day before yesterday, I want to make sure that my position is not mischaracterized by the chairman and others. This is my budget. And I had to battle for this
Then I'll
budget.
have to retract all those nice compliments I gave you.
That's why I want to make sure that the compliments are earned and not just said to be nice. I am very proud of this budget, and I think all of you know that when it comes budget time, you go into deliberations, and I have 2 sets of deliberations. I go into deliberations with the administration, and then I come and what I would like to do is be involved in the deliberations with the Congress on how the budget turns out. So I'm very proud of the budget that we're presenting today because it builds on what I think was an incredible budget from this Congress in fiscal year 2016, and I cannot thank you enough for that. You all really, you made us feel needed and appreciated, and we want to keep doing that. So that's what we tried to do with this budget. It's been my honor to serve as the NASA administrator throughout the Obama administration, and as we submit what is likely my final budget, yes, ma'am, I am proud of the many things this agency has accomplished on behalf of the American people with the resources the President and the Congress have committed to us over the past 7 years. Together, we have enabled our nation to continue leading the world in space exploration and scientific discovery. 2 weeks ago, American astronaut Scott Kelly returned home from the International Space Station after 12 months working off the Earth for the Earth. His year in space will pay scientific and medical dividends for years to come, helping pave the way for future astronauts to travel to Mars and beyond. Commander Kelly significantly advanced our journey to Mars, and I trust that you join me in saluting his service to our nation. NASA is closer to sending American astronauts to Mars than at any point in human history, and this budget will keep us moving forward. The support of this committee and the Congress is essential to this journey. The International Space Station is the cornerstone of our exploration strategy. Thanks to the determination and ingenuity of American industry, we have returned space station cargo resupply launches to U.S. soil, in-source jobs, and helped establish a new private market in low Earth orbit. American companies are now ferrying supplies to our astronauts on the space station from the United States, with orbital ATK set to launch again later this month, and SpaceX targeting a resupply mission in early April, both from the Kennedy Space Center. In July, Orbital will conduct a return-to-flight mission from the Wallops Flight Facility. Thanks to the administration's decision to invest in American industry and to the full funding we received from Congress for 2016, spearheaded by this committee was the first to propose full funding for the President's commercial crew program, and I really appreciate that. But now Boeing and SpaceX continue to make great progress towards certification in 2017 to safely transport our astronauts to the space station from U.S. soil, ending our sole reliance on Russia once and for all. NASA is making significant progress on the journey to Mars, developing our newest, most powerful rocket ever built, the Space Launch System and Orion crew vehicle, as part of the sustainable and affordable deep space exploration system. This budget supports the agency's baseline commitment for an uncrewed test flight of SLS and Orion in 2018 and a crewed flight by 2023. With additional funding provided by the Congress, the teams continue to work toward an earlier launch date for the first crewed mission and are already designing and procuring long lead hardware for subsequent missions. The budget also increases funding for habitation systems development, a key component of our stepping stone strategy to send humans to Mars. The President's budget funds a robust science program with dozens of operating missions studying our solar system, the universe, and the most important planet in our solar system, Earth. This coming July 4th, Independence Day, the Juno spacecraft will orbit Jupiter, while the Cassini spacecraft will prepare to execute its dramatic grand finale orbits of Saturn. OSIRIS-REx will launch to a near-Earth asteroid to collect a sample for return to Earth in 2023. In 2017 and 2018, NASA will launch seven exciting space science missions, including the James Webb Space Telescope. Before we send humans to Mars, robots are paving the way, with Mars InSight now targeted for launch in 2018. Another Mars rover set to launch in 2020, joining the Curiosity and Opportunity rovers now exploring the Red Planet, and work underway to define the next Mars mission for 2022. We are formulating missions to explore Jupiter's moon Europa, as well as WFIRST, designed to study dark energy, perform galactic and extragalactic surveys, and explore exoplanets. We're accelerating the building of Landsat 9 as part of our sustainable land imaging architecture to continue our 40-year record of high-quality measurements of Earth's land cover. NASA technology drives exploration. With this request, NASA will continue to conduct rapid development and incorporation of transformative missions, space technology missions to enable future human and robotic missions, increase capabilities of other U.S. agencies, and address aerospace industry challenges. Space technology investments will ensure that we continue to lead the world in exploration and scientific discovery. NASA's aeronautics program advances U.S. global leadership by developing and transferring key enabling technologies to make aviation safer, more efficient, and more environmentally friendly. With this request, NASA Aeronautics is ready to take the next step to develop and fly X-plane demonstrators in partnership with industry and academia, including ultra-efficient subsonic transport experimental aircraft and the world's first low-boom supersonic flight demonstrator. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the support that we have received from this committee through the years, and I look forward to your questions, and I too would like to commend the young ladies who are in the audience today, all of them, but a special shout out to the ones from Spelman, since that is also the alma mater of my wife and my daughter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, thank you. I appreciate you very, very much. And we stand adjourned, we stand in recess until 5 minutes after this vote, okay? No, don't go anywhere, General. All right. like to call us back to order after our recess. And again, thank General Bolden for his testimony. And now I'd like to recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. And again, thank you for being here, General Bolden. I'd like to ask you a question about the budget, of course. The former Space Shuttle Commander Eileen Collins was testifying before our committee probably less than, 3 weeks ago maybe, about the decision to cancel the Constellation program that was not made by NASA at all, but by the White House. She said, "I believe the program cancellation decisions that are made by bureaucracies behind closed doors and without input by the people are divisive, damaging, and," she said, "cowardly, and many times more expensive in the long run. Similar complaints of White House meddling with NASA's programs, counter to NASA's own program managers, surround the Sophia telescope aircraft, the Orion crew vehicle, Space Launch System, and various Mars missions. The point here is that this White House ignores NASA's input, but then tells you and your associate administrators to defend their decisions before Congress. And as you mentioned a while ago, maybe it's not just all of his decisions. That's what we'd like to find out. Did the White House consult you about this idea to fund NASA through mandatory spending accounts?"
No, sir, they did not, but we had extensive discussions after we saw the budget, and because I asked the question of what's the difference, and when I had my conversation, or at least passing words from between me and the OMB director, I was assured that our budget is $19 billion. And so if you ask me to define for you what the difference is between mandatory and discretionary, I'm going to take it for the record.
Right.
Because my budget is $19 billion.
Okay, and then without this mandatory spending, it looks like the White House's proposed budget for NASA is about $1 billion less than Congress appropriated last year, which was $19.2 billion. The White House is wasting everyone's time with this mandatory spending proposal and trying to obfuscate that they're proposing to cut NASA's budget by $1 billion. A continuing resolution would be better than this request. And why are you advocating a cut to NASA?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not advocating a cut to NASA. We are advocating a $19 billion budget. And to be quite honest, the reason it wasn't 19.3 was because we had no idea that the 16 budget was going to be 19.3. We were, as I said before, we were all startled pleasantly to receive a $19.3 billion budget from the Congress. Had we had to pass our final numbers in prior to, had we had the benefit of knowing what the 16 budget was going to be, we would have asked for even more. But I was, as I said before, I am very happy with the $19 billion settlement that we came up with in our negotiations with the administration. And you know, I think there are many other things that had to be compensated for, and that's the reason that I think that they chose to use mandatory and discretionary. There are some things that we didn't count on last year, dealing with the census, dealing with some of our partners, for example, dealing with refugees. There are a lot of different issues that come up that come from the discretionary spending pool. And so, you know, the president has really tried to push research and development, technology development from the moment he became president. And this represented a way to do that. And I think if you look at what is in the mandatory section, it is mostly technology development, engineering type things, whether it's in human exploration or science or anywhere.
I understand. With a nearly $20 trillion national debt, and the biggest problem being mandatory spending side of spending, that's a tough nut to crack. And I'd like to ask you about SLS and Orion. In this year's budget request, the administration continues to play the game of back and forth with Congress on SLS and Orion funding, negatively impacting the schedule for getting American astronauts back into deep space exploration. NASA is formally committed to launch the first crewed mission of SLS and Orion, known as EM2, no later than 2023. The FY17 request funds this commitment. At the same time, NASA says that it is internally planning for an EM1 launch in 2021. Why doesn't NASA simply request funding for a 2021 launch date?
Mr. Chairman, the funds that we requested and came in the President's budget requests support our detailed estimate of how much it would cost and what the time would be to fly the first human mission in SLS and Orion, and that is 2023, utilizing a process that we call joint confidence level process, and it gives us a 70% confidence that our numbers are correct. So when we went through the formal process of evaluating based on what we assumed the budget might be, that's how we came up with the 2023 time. The Congress, when they appropriated more than was requested, that's the number that we use when we say we're working an internal number. You know, if the Congress decides that they want to plus SLS up every year, you would be on a path to an earlier launch. And the earlier launch, I don't know what that date would be, but it would be earlier than the President's budget request number.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to recognize the gentlewoman from Maryland, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow on this date of the internal 2021 date versus the external 2023, but I want to go to a different place. The Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel in its 2015 annual report said that NASA had briefed the ASAP on measures that appear to be making safety trade-offs in order to maintain a 2021 EM2 launch schedule. And if ASAP thought it was important enough to raise General Bolden, the question is whether there is pressure that's been either perceived or real with regard to safety trade-offs. And so I wonder if you've had an opportunity to talk to ASAP about this, and what are you doing to ensure that the agency isn't making near-term trades in trying to meet a schedule that could wind up negatively affecting the safety needed throughout a long-term exploration program?
Ms. Edwards, I talk to the ASAP all the time. I generally make the ASAP meetings when I travel to wherever they are, and Admiral Dyer and I have phone calls back and forth. I would emphasize to everyone, though, as the ASAP states in their report, that we have done an awful lot over the last 5-6 years. When you look at SLS, core stage is in production at Michoud. We just had a big test firing, 500-second firing on the main engine down at Stennis. The well for the Orion crew module was completed, and it's been shipped to the Cape. So,
right. So those are the technologies. I'm talking about safety and the ASAP's concern with safety and whether this pressure to meet a 2023 external goal, 2021 rather, whether that is too much to ensure the safety of the mission.
No one puts more emphasis on safety than the administrator, than I do. And I share the ASAP's concern that we not be blindly progressing toward a particular date. And that's the reason that we have emphasized to the Congress before that as far as we are concerned, as far as the date that the agency is committed to, it's 2023. You know, if we are able to, there are two things that the ASAP pointed out in the report that you cite, and I'll use the terms they use. They talked about sufficiency and timing when it comes to their concern about safety. Sufficiency is the level of funding we get. The most important thing is timing. When you get appropriations late each year, that means we're operating with less money than we need. We're holding on purchasing long lead items. We're holding on everything. It's disastrous to industry. They can't plan, so that's the concern that the ASAP has. And I think, I hope the Congress doesn't miss their message. It's a message to all of us that it's not just important to have a certain amount of money, but you need to be able to have a program, a development program, that can count on getting the money when you need it. We went through this with Commercial Crew.
I mean, look, I share that concern, but let's remember that we also went through, for different reasons, a Columbia disaster, a Challenger disaster, where there were these pressures for time that ended up in what ultimately sacrificed safety and cost lives. And I just want to make sure that we are paying attention to those things here. I want to go on to another it would be great, I think, Mr. Chairman, if you were to hold a hearing at some point or other just examining this specific concern around safety that ASAP has raised, and maybe we can get to the bottom of this. I want to ask you about earth science in my time remaining. Some people have criticized the level of funding that's been given to earth science in the 2017 budget request. We heard that here today. And I think what's so often not understood is how NASA's earth science missions and research affect the daily lives of Americans. And so I would like you to give us some concrete example of how earth science missions and research have actually benefited the American people and our economy.
I'll give you two, I think, really good examples. We have two missions. One is called SMAP, Soil Moisture Active Passive. The other one is called GRACE, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it looks at it looks at changes in Earth's gravity, and it can therefore tell us what's in a water reservoir under the surface of Earth. Those two missions have been used to help us with water issues out on the West Coast, as well as around the world. So they have both economic and strategic value. We look at a program called Severe that Earth Science supports, where we provide 30 years of archived Earth science data and real-time data from our Earth science satellites around the world to help farmers in crop planting, water resources management, disaster relief. An earthquake occurs somewhere, and an Earth science satellite is put, at work right away to try to help the disaster managers determine what to do. So those are just a couple of examples of what is done today. For example, in Texas and Louisiana, we probably have a UAV SAR mission. It's an airborne mission, not a satellite. Airborne mission out of Armstrong with a synthetic aperture radar.
That is happening.
That's helping to look at levees and dams and the like to detect where there may be leaks, so that we can warn a community if, we don't do the warning, but we provide the data to the state and local leaders so that they can make decisions. We've been credited with contributing to saving thousands of lives in Bangladesh last year with SMAP, because it enabled us to predict flooding in the annual rains in Bangladesh. So those are concrete examples of how our earth science program, it's not just a national program, it is an international program, highly respected and counted on by nations around the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Let's see, the next one is Mr. Rohrbacher, the gentleman from California.
All right, thank you very much. General, I notice, well, welcome aboard, and I share the chairman's and other people's admiration and gratitude to you for the service you've been to our country, both as a Marine and both in your current position. I notice you're wearing a green tie.
Yes, sir.
Does that mean you're Irish?
It means I am Irish through my daughter Kelly, who was born today. So
All right.
she
Kelly.
is Kelly O'Bolden, born on St. Patrick's Day.
Now let's see. There's Kelly and there's Scott, and then we have Scott
Kelly.
So maybe you could answer me. The question is, I understand that the Mars rover has picked up these pictures that have been identified as various elements of a former civilization, and I do understand that they have found an ancient bottle of Guinness on Mars. Is that correct?
I will go back and check that. I'll take that for the record.
And could it be that leprechauns were ancient aliens? Space aliens?
I will take that for the record also, sir.
All right. Let me note about the line of questioning that we just had, and that is the projects that you outlined, and our friends on the other side of the aisle are pushing for NASA to be involved in. We have no question about whether there is value to these Earth-related projects. The question is only whether they should be part of the NASA budget, and that's our main area of debate here. And certainly if, now I won't put you on the spot, but the fact is, if we weren't doing some of the Earth science things and NASA's budget could stay the same, if we took those items and put them into NOAA and other places that they belong, or the NSGS, for example, then I would take it that you would not be as adamantly insisting how important they are, but maybe somebody else could be paying for it.
I would still insist that they're critically important. Some of you may remember that in 2014, the president's budget request proposed that funding for sustained land imaging, the Landsat program, come from the Department of Interior, from USGS's budget, and the Congress rejected that and put the funds back in NASA simply because they felt that we were the appropriate organization to have it. The other agencies of the government, we provide the design, the build, the production and checkout for all the imaging satellites, almost all that are in the civil sector. The other agencies don't have that capability, and so it's a partnership, and it's worked for 43 years now in the case of Landsat, and you know, NOAA today has an effective orbiting weather satellite when they're a little bit better off than folk on.
But I do understand NOAA. Aren't you compensated from the NOAA budget for what you're doing with NOAA there, as compared to the Geological Survey?
We are indeed.
You are. You have to. So I think that if I would imagine that if we could actually fund these other earth sciences and not take it out of your budget, that it would be something that would be positive, but I won't put you on the spot on that. No. Let's note that another thing that's saving us money, however, is the commercial crew, and I want to thank all of my colleagues and thank you for the leadership that you've shown in trying to show this cost-saving methodology of bringing the private sector in when we can, and then letting NASA focus on those things that the private sector can't do. And I know that Virgin Galactic right now is deeply involved in developing a suborbital space transportation, which is terrific. I would hope that we could also, for example, have a commercial approach perhaps to lunar missions. Now, I know that NASA is not focused on lunar missions right now, but perhaps the private sector could be involved with lunar missions, and we could have some kind of involvement there or coordination, but let the private sector pick up some of the cost of going back to the moon if we can do that.
Mr. Rohrbacher, you're absolutely right, and I would say, you know, NASA's on a journey to Mars. Our destination for the nation, this is what we recommended, and what I have to compliment, Chairman Smith isn't here right now, I complimented Mr. Perlmutter. They wrote an absolutely incredible op-ed or an article on, you know, the fact that we are the greatest nation in the world. We need to be going to Mars. But everyone should understand, and I think we're mischaracterized when they said we're ignoring the moon. We're going to spend 10 years, the decade of the 20s, in cislunar space, and we call it the proving ground. And that is a period of time when, if everything works the way we hope, commercial entities, entrepreneurial entities, maybe even some of our international partners will ask us to assist them in preparing things like landers that may put humans back on the surface of the moon on the way to Mars. But this nation has to focus on the big thing, which is Mars. If we don't, then nobody goes there.
Well, General, I think it's possible to focus on the very next step in the stairway.
And that's the 10 years in the proving ground. That is the next step.
Focusing on the where you're going at the end of the stairwell. One last note, very quickly, because my time is up, and that is, I hope that one of the things we really need is to make sure our country and the world is prepared for a possible collision with some space rock that could kill millions of people. Yes, I applaud you. I want to work with you on making sure that NASA is playing its role in this global defense against an asteroid or a meteor. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to recognize the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much. General Bolden, the New Aviation Horizons project is certainly an exciting initiative. And this is a decade-long initiative based on funding offsets that are part of the administration's 21st Century Clean Transportation Plan. What are the potential benefits of the X-plane flight demonstrations included in the plan?
Well, there are 4 demonstrators that we have, you know, right now that we would really like to do. The one that we're attacking first is the low-boom supersonic demonstrator, and people ask why that one first, and it's because industry is poised to help us design and build a low-boom supersonic demonstrator. It's going to increase their ability to compete around the world in supersonic transport. And we've been working on this for a number of years now, and there are a number of companies like Lockheed, Boeing, Gulfstream that have plans on the drawing board, and they just need a demonstrator to help us get the FAA to change the regulations prohibiting supersonic flight over ground. The other one is hybrid wing body. The Department of Defense is very interested, not just civilian aviation, but the Department of Defense in terms of transport, cargo transport. Hybrid wing body changes the efficiency of an airplane, increases our fuel efficiency, gives them longer range. So that's a second thing that's going to have an economic and strategic impact for the nation. And then finally, hybrid electric systems, where we actually sometimes you mix electric engines with a regular turbine engine, and other times you just use electric engines. We've been collaborating with our partners in the German Space Agency because they were out in front of us, and so this initiative will allow us to kind of catch up with them and assume some of the leadership in looking at hybrid electric systems.
What are the implications of not sustaining this project over the decade should the funding fluctuate over time?
The bottom line implication is that the United States will lose its place as the leader in aviation and aeronautics. We're struggling to maintain that right now, and that was one of the driving forces behind aeronautics coming up with a new strategic plan in 2014 with the 6 strategic thrusts that were part of that plan, and now being able to announce with industry, academia, and others about 2 weeks ago that the President supported this new Aviation Horizons initiative that's going to allow the U.S. to maintain their leadership. Aviation accounts for the largest balance of trade item in this country by a long shot. And if we don't get out in front of everybody and do the types of development that will be covered in the new Aviation Horizons, we'll lose that edge.
Does it seem to have the possibility of attracting young people to aeronautics? And
No
sustaining the
question
pipeline?
no question whatsoever. I go to college campuses today, and it hasn't been that long since we started talking about this initiative. Students who are studying aeronautical engineering they're ecstatic. They're beside themselves. I had a special assistant from Langley by the name of Mr. Eric Exdahl, who is a hypersonics specialist. After his 6 months up here with me, he left semi-depressed because he did not hear that the U.S. was going to invest in hypersonics. He now, is a little bit happier camper because he feels that he has not gone to school and been educated and done stuff because the U.S. is going to maintain their leadership in hypersonics because of that. And every one of you hopefully has a copy of our little flyer here, and it's got information on the back, and we'd be more than happy to come to your district or to your office or anywhere and help you understand some of this. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bolden, first I'd like to applaud your choice of Todd May as Director of the Marshall Space Flight Center, located in my district, and I'd also like to thank his predecessor, Patrick Sherman, for his many years of service and leadership at NASA, especially at the Marshall Space Flight Center. I'm excited about the continued success at Marshall and throughout NASA. That having been said, have you designated a NASA center lead for rocket propulsion that would be able to integrate all of NASA's expertise in deep space travel on the journey to Mars?
Congressman, we don't use the term lead center anymore. It has a bad connotation for people who were around at the time of Challenger. But what we have done is we have an effort ongoing. It started out as something we call TCAT that I think we explained to everybody now. It's just baseline services assessment, where we're trying to identify centers who have the highest level of capability in a particular field. There is no question that the Marshall Space Flight Center is one of their core capabilities is propulsion. And so no question whether we're talking to DOD or anybody else outside of NASA that Marshall is the place that people go when they want to discuss in space and leaving the Earth propulsion issues.
Well, for lack of a better word, I'm going to use it again in my next question. While I'm asking about program leads, who is program lead for Europa?
The program lead for Europa presently, let me take it for the record, but as my memory serves me, The Jet Propulsion Lab is the lead for procurement of things like the spacecraft bus and others. And then we have other centers that are contributing to that. But JPL would be, in your terms, would be considered the lead, although they're an FFRDC, but it's because of their expertise in planetary travel.
Well, isn't JPL a federal funded research and development center?
Yes, sir.
And my impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that federally funded research and development centers, by their nature, can only supply one-of-a-kind research and development and not be a program manager.
That is, I don't think that is, let me take that for the record. The definition of a program manager, I don't think there's a prohibition because of their unique experience and expertise in planetary flight. For example, Curiosity and most of our Mars missions. JPL is the center that has achieved that for NASA for decades. We have been providing precursors on the way to Mars since the 60s, and Jet Propulsion Lab has generally been the lead in doing that work. So I'll take it for the record for your strict definition of who can be a program manager, but program managers for planetary missions have always been not always, have dominantly been at JPL.
Thank you. I'll move on to another area. Earlier this week at an appropriations hearing, you spoke about the need for, quote, game-changing, end quote, propulsion. Do you support nuclear thermal propulsion, and what role do you see it playing in the journey to Mars?
We are on a journey to Mars, and most people believe that in the end, nuclear thermal propulsion will probably be the most effective form of propulsion to get there. Right now, we're funding at a very low level development of low-grade nuclear fuel so that we don't have to go through what we go through today. So we're taking a step-by-step approach to getting to the use of nuclear thermal propulsion, but we are years away from doing that. Again, Marshall is the dominant center. They have most of the capability there, and they're working with some of their local contractors who are helping them with developing nuclear thermal propulsion.
Congress authorized $20 million for nuclear thermal propulsion for fiscal year 16. How much is NASA planning on actually spending in FY16 on nuclear thermal propulsion?
I'll take that for the record, Congressman. I'll just take it for the record. I think I remember, but I don't want to guess.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Byer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Thank you, Administrator Bolden, for being with us again. The planetary science has come up again and again, and I think in the opening chairman's remarks, he talked about why is NASA paying for NOAA's satellite research? Why is NASA paying for USGS's Landsat stuff? So why? Why don't
in the
they
case
pay for
of
them?
in the case of USGS and Landsat, it is because the Congress refused the president's budget request to transfer money for Landsat into the Department of Interior. So this Congress decided that sustained land imaging is really important, and they put the money back in the, according to my budget people, they put the money back into NASA because we've done it for so long. I'll go back and double check my memory, but I think that's pretty simple in that case.
So you'd be fine to have it in the USGS budget as long as we put it there?
As long as the nation continues to do sustained land imaging and weather and those kinds of things, I think any administrator is perfectly happy to make sure that we support whoever's doing it. You would also have to transfer the people from NASA when you talk about the design and build of satellites, because those agencies don't have the capability to do that. Okay. We have the expertise, and that's, I think, why Congress comes back to us and puts the money in the NASA budget. So you're talking about a little bit more than just transferring money. You're probably going to transfer people if you really want those agencies to do what we do.
So on the creation of the mandatory spending, the $733 million from cuts, consolidation, savings, did you do that, or did the budget in order to adapt to BCA, to the Budget Control Act?
I am told that the Budget Control Act was a large factor in the Office of Management and Budget deciding on how to divide the money. That is immaterial to me as the NASA administrator. My conversations with with the director of OMB through his senior people was, look, you have $19 billion that the president is supporting. So that's, I don't work with mandatory, discretionary.
Okay.
My chief financial officer, he can understand.
Different question then. You mentioned in your testimony that because we were on a continuing resolution, we didn't get the omnibus spending until just before Christmas. Would you have requested north of the $19.285 billion if you'd known when you were putting the budget together that we were going to authorize or actually appropriate 19.285?
Congressman Beyer, I always request more money than we get. And you know, any administrator, director, or anybody that doesn't go in with a significantly higher number than they expect they're going to get is asking not to get anything. I think anybody would tell you the NASA administrator always comes in with a higher number than I ultimately get. I do the same thing with the Congress.
So it's safe to say that this 1.3% reduction is at least partly based on the absence of the information about where we were going to end up in FY 2006.
Largely based on that.
Yeah.
Had we known that the Congress was going to appropriate $19.3 billion, I would have been comfortable going in and asking for even more than we asked for.
So there are some cynics who suggested that OMB and NASA deliberately understated deep space exploration, Space Launch System Orion, because they knew that the Space Committee in Congress loved those and would push them back.
That is, I've heard that stated before, but as I said again, at the president's requested budget level, we are on target, and we will produce the first flight of SLS and Orion with a human crew in 2023, and we have a 70% confidence level that we can do that. That's how we came up with the 2023, and you know, we decided 70% was the number we want to make, and it's a lot more fancy than I can explain in this hearing, but that's the number we came up with. And if all we got was the president's budget request, we would be launching EM2 in 2023. I do have to say, we are focused on a program to get humans to Mars, not the first 2 flights. And we could spend everything in the world on EM1 and EM2 and then have nothing left for a sustained program. So we're using that. If you gave me more money, I'd buy down risk. Go back to Mrs. Edwards' question. There is always risk. And more money for me means I can spend more to buy down risk.
We only have 20 seconds left, so very quickly, the roadmap, the journey to Mars. Many people have criticized that Congress and NASA are not yet on the same page in terms of what that roadmap needs to be.
I think we're much more on the same page than most people are willing to admit. We don't know ultimately how we're going to make the final step from cislunar space to Mars. We just don't know, and it would be irresponsible of me as the NASA administrator to pick a particular design reference mission the way we've always done in NASA and try to hold everybody to that, to try to determine what the final architecture is going to be. If we decided right now, the question that the congressman from Alabama asked, that says nuclear thermal propulsion is out, because I don't have a budget that sustains nuclear thermal propulsion or VASIMR or any of those advanced propulsion systems now. But I'm an optimistic person, and I think that by the time we reach the end of the 2020s, the middle of the 2020s, we will have gotten sufficient funding from the Congress and the administration that we'll be well on the way to new types of in-space propulsion. We'll be able to have much more robust environmental control and life support systems, and we're not there yet. And so it would be irresponsible of me to try to give you an architecture and a roadmap that has milestone flights with a design of a vehicle. We're just not there yet.
Thank you, sir, very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, thank you. And I'd like to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for having this. Administrator Bolden, I want to thank you. You know I'm going to talk about the big A.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate this picture very much. You put an American hero on here. He is not looking at green there. He's looking at a lake bed, and he's looking at a B-52. But Bill Dana is an American hero, and I thank you for putting him on there. From 1968 to about 2000 or 2002, hypersonic research went from about the height to almost a 0, and then we jumped again with the X-43 program. We went from the X-43 to the X-51, and then again, we decided that either money or it wasn't worth our while, probably the first, was the reason why we weren't going to go into hypersonic research. Can you tell me what a commitment is from NASA, what a commitment is from Congress to make sure that we continue on with hypersonic research so America will be the leaders on hypersonics and not China or someone else?
If Congress accepts the president's proposed budget, particularly the part that deals with aeronautics, it's a $25 million annual amount that NASA's commitment to DOD, to the integrated government, you know, DOD, intelligence community, everybody else that needs hypersonics. $25 million allows us to maintain our expertise, but most importantly, our facilities at Langley, at Glenn, at Ames. Anything less than that, and we're going to be back where we were in those times that you described where we're down. We're going to be back where we were when Eric Extall left to go back to Langley when he felt that there was no future in hypersonics. This is, $25 million is the base that NASA needs to retain the nation's primary capability for fundamental hypersonics research. That is us. We do that. Nobody else does that.
Perfect statement. You do that. We want NASA to be on the leading edge. I think that there are civilian companies that would like to jump into that realm at some point. But remember, typically, NASA will do an awful lot of R&D before private companies will jump into the mix.
Yes, sir.
And that is the case here. Two other programs I'd like to talk about because you know I'm going to talk about aeronautics quite a bit. The first one is the low boom demonstrator. Now, again, we went through a jousting program for about a 3-year period where we put a big old almost pitot tube at the end of an F-15 and did some jousting to do a low boom so that hopefully us congressmen from the West Coast can fly across this country in 2 hours one day. And we will alleviate that restriction from the FAA that's been going on since 1974, and all of these things that you know, if any of you have ever heard of sonic boom, I know you've probably heard 1,000, and I've heard 1,000. They're disrupting. Yeah. But with a low boom demonstrator, it is almost a hum or a very, you almost wouldn't know it. It's a murmur, exactly. Explain how important that would be to the economics of this country, the economics of the world, if we could get there.
Congressman Knight, it would be critically important to this nation economically because right now the European Space Agency, well, the European aeronautics companies, because most of their flight is over water, they have said, we don't care. You know, we don't have the regulation that the FAA has put on American aircraft not to fly supersonically over ground. So, as you said, the low boom technology has allowed us to really reduce what is it's energy from sound that breaks windows and stuff. The low boom configuration actually causes it to be just a murmur and comfortable to people. We will have aircraft that will be able to get places much faster. Businessmen, for example, can do their business. They can get around the world in 6 hours instead of however much time it takes today. Yeah. Anybody. And you know, there is a common misconception. I've heard it said, one of the reasons that people resisted our efforts in this regard was because they said, well, the only reason for having supersonic airplanes is so that rich people can go places fast.
Not true.
That's you know, some of us normal people want to go places.
That's right.
Fast
Some of us normal people
also.
want to go.
And I do a lot of intercontinental travel. I would love to be able to get into an airplane and go from here to Moscow or wherever else I'm going in a couple of hours instead of the 14 hours that it takes today.
And lastly, on my 15 seconds, I'm just going to thank you. We fully funded Sophia again. Sophia is to me, a moving classroom. It's not unlike the space shuttle. We used the space shuttle in the beginning for an awful lot of research and astronauts, but we put teachers on. We did many things, as you know, with the space shuttle program. We're doing that with Sophia. So we take 5th grade teachers in there. They go back and they inspire our 5th graders to now be the next Charlie Bolden. They inspire them to be an astronaut, and that is exactly what these types of programs are doing. They are benefiting the country, not just the science that we are getting out of Sophia. So I want to thank you for that, too.
Thank you for your
Thank you, Mr.
support.
Chair.
Thank you. I'd now like to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra. He's not here?
Nope.
Okay. Mr. Perlmutter from Colorado.
Thank you. I'm from
Yes, sir.
Colorado, and I'm a lot better looking than Barra, so it's okay. Mr. Knight sort of highlighted some of the things that have been so inspirational recently, whether it's New Horizons or talking about the Sophia, things like that. And that's, I got to tell you, I serve on two committees. My colleagues have heard this before. One is Financial Services. The other is this committee, the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And the way we are pushing the horizon and moving forward with our science, even though it's kind of herky-jerky at times, we are doing it. And it really, that's what Americans want to see us do. You know, whether it's in a caucus in, you know, suburban Denver or primary, people want to know that we can work together. And on this committee, you know, there are places where we fight, but we work together on a lot of issues. And want to keep an eye on the budget, obviously. That's part of our job as members of Congress. Want to have good people in an agency like yours who we can trust to be good engineers, scientists, mathematicians, technicians. To take on these major tasks, which you said and everybody knows are not without risk. So the chairman and I wrote this op-ed, this article on getting us to Mars by 2033. And it came from information that we had at a hearing about 3-4 months ago. And I like to use my prop, this bumper sticker, 2033, we can do this. Because we can. And the responsibility of those of us up here is to provide the financial platform for you all to design your program and the building blocks that go into place. Mr. Rohrbacher was talking about the moon. That may be part of your building blocks. I'm not a scientist. I can't determine how you want to build the program that gets our astronauts to Mars by 2033, but I can help you by assuring your agency that Democrats and Republicans, Congresses from now until 2033, and administrations from now until 33 really do have a major effort in place. So how does NASA look at us when we say something like, yeah, get there by 2033? Is it with a little bit of skepticism, I would imagine?
Not at all. When you know, to have a member of Congress who has a bumper sticker that says we can do this, we don't see the American public doesn't see that enough. You know, in this day and age, what the young people sitting here see and hear all the time is, we can't do this. We are not a great nation. We are going to be, but we're not right now. That's just bunk. We're the greatest nation in the world. We always have been. And if we stay focused, Congressman Edwards used the term constancy of purpose. She probably got that from the same person I did, from Admiral Joe Dyer, the chairman of my ASAP. Constancy of purpose means exactly what you and Chairman Smith wrote, but you've got to believe that. The Congress and the administration have got to come together, and they've got to set long-term vision that's going to go beyond that administration. Most of what I do today, I'm never going to see it, you know, but I'm doing it for my grandchildren. That's what you all should be doing. You know, you should be looking out and saying, whoever takes my place, I'm going to brief them on why I supported this and make sure that they do it. We plan to do the same thing with the incoming administration, the incoming candidates, to be quite honest. We want to let them know what NASA is doing and what the Congress and the administration, in spite of what everybody says, you all work pretty well together now and then. And so you have set us on a course to Mars. We can get there in the 2030s. But it's a long, hard, risky slog. And we've got to do things on the International Space Station. We've got to spend 10 years in cislunar space. That's going to allow people like Congressman Rohrbacher talked about, who have these visions of doing what we once did, putting humans on the surface of the moon. NASA can help them, but NASA can't stop at the moon. If we set the moon as our primary objective, that's it. We're not going any farther than that. So that's why we're focused on Mars. And we've got a pretty good plan that'll get us there. but it is step by step. We've just got to stay together in doing that.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, so for us, our problem is a pretty, substantial one, which is to find the billions of dollars that will, support the effort. And I've learned some new terms, one-year appropriations, multi-year appropriations, and something called no-year appropriations, which I still don't quite understand. So, but we're working on it, and I think we're working together, and we want to get this done. So thank you, sir, for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General, for your service to our armed forces and NASA.
Thank you.
I'd like to focus just for a moment on Exploration Mission 1, referred to in all our paperwork as EM1. The first time that you'll fly SLS and Orion together, hopefully in 2018. The Government Accountability Office, let me just get its quote, and the NASA Inspector General have both cautioned us that Exploration Mission 1 could be delayed because of potential risks for the Exploration Ground Systems Program. The administration is requesting $403 million in discretionary spending in fiscal year 2017, a reduction of $6.8 million from fiscal year 16. How will this request impact the Exploration 1 schedule? I mean, understand, we can fully fund Orion.
Yes, sir.
We can fully fund SLS. We can fully fund all the airplane research. We can fully plan all the weather stuff. But if we don't have the ground systems in place, nothing's going to get off the ground, General.
Mr. Posey, you're preaching to the choir, and this is what I've said to this and other committees for many years. It is great to be focused on the vehicles, but unless you have a launch complex like the Kennedy Space Center, the world's most incredible multi-user launch complex, unless you have that, you're going nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's, when people talk about a critical part of SLS is the ground system. SLS with no ground system is worthless. So because we're given a limited budget, we try to take the funds that are in the big category of exploration and use them so that the ground system, the rocket, and the module get to launch day together. And that requires doing what Bob Cabana is doing in an incredibly fine manner down at the Kennedy Space Center. The other thing that has helped is having commercial entities that now provide access to low Earth orbit so that we don't have to worry about that. If you go down to Kennedy now and you look at Launch Complex 39A from where Neil Armstrong launched, that's now American industry. That's SpaceX. And I haven't seen it recently, but everybody tells me it is mind-boggling what they're doing to 39A. That's American ingenuity, and that's what's going to take us to Mars. So I could not agree with you more. We've got to focus on the infrastructure, and that's exploration ground systems. So when I say I want to take $1 million or whatever it is that people think is designated for the rocket because I want to upgrade the security on the exploration ground system, we're not doing that because we're being frivolous. We see that EGS is not going to be ready in time to meet the rocket's date unless we do it that way. So,
Well, thank you. Those are magic words to my ears, General. And so I assume then that I can be assured that we're not going to end up with an SLS and Orion and lack a ground systems that's ready to launch.
I can assure you, sir, that with the President's budget request at that level, the Exploration Ground System, SLS, and Orion will be ready to launch in 2018 together.
Thank you for that assurance.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The Orion program received $1.27 billion in fiscal year 16. The discretionary request from NASA for fiscal year 17 is $1.05 billion. Will this request delay EM2, Exploration Mission 2, where we're going to actually put men in here. If NASA received 1.27 in fiscal year 17 for Ryan, would EM2 be delayed?
At the president's budget request, EM2 is scheduled to go in 2023, and that's our commitment to the president, to the Congress, to the nation. As I commented to Congresswoman Edwards, if you gave me the levels that you continue to give, then we're going to make sure we will make 2023. We could make earlier, but I want to get away from people focusing on an earlier date, because that does bring concerns about safety into the mix, and that's what the ASAP was talking about. You know, 2023 is a great date. If that's what we think we can meet with a 70% confidence level, increased funding even makes it even more certain we're going to make that date. But the team will continue. The team always works to be ready earlier than projected. So we probably could launch earlier than 2023 with increased funding. But we have committed to 2023, and we'll make that at the president's budget request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see I'm out of time.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think we've got enough time for us to go back through one more time. Or did somebody just come in? Oh, yeah, we got I think everybody's already asked a question, but let's go back through one more time, and let's maybe limit it to about 2 minutes, if that's okay. So my question would be on the mandatory spending, and I'd like everybody to know the implications of this. And I'm just wondering if the president and the administration and you are fully aware, because I heard you mention a while ago that whether it's mandatory or discretionary, it doesn't matter to you. You just want the money. But as members of Congress, I would like for you to be fully aware of the consequences for tapping into mandatory spending. The budget requests include funding derived from mandatory spending, such as, and this will be, let me just tell you, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, they're subject to the pay-go rule, which means that any new entitlement program must be accompanied by a corresponding cut to an existing entitlement or an increase in taxes. In other words, we've got to pay for this. In order to pay for NASA's entitlement spending, the president's budget request calls for skyrocketing tax increases across the board, as well as cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And other proposed cuts include reduction to student loans, their program, unemployment insurance, and veterans benefits. It would also create new fees for farmers, hunters, air travelers, increase military health care co-payments, and federal employee health care and retirement costs. It would increase the cost of our postal service, mail, reduce U.S. Postal Services. These proposals would increase the cost of every American's electricity bill, as well as the price they pay at the pump. Just a few months ago, Congress fully funded NASA at $19.28 billion without any budget gimmicks, tax increases, or entitlement cuts. And now the president is requesting a $1 billion cut to NASA in discretionary spending and asking for pie-in-the-sky tax increases, cuts to mandatory benefits, and increased entitlements with this mandatory side. Why should Americans agree to this budget request when NASA would receive more money under a CR, continuing resolution, without any of the pain that this budget request would cause? And I would invite you to please look at the president's budget right here and take a look at table S9, page 129 of the president's budget. We will have 9 pages of tax increases and billions of dollars in cuts to programs that are already there or increases in taxes. So why should Americans agree to this budget request without, when we have more money under the proposed CR, and not have any of the pain that this budget request would cause?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not a budgeteer.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, I just wanted you to know.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because we have to look at this. Sure. When it says mandatory spending, there are implications, there are consequences to this, and the consequences. You're a veteran.
Yes, sir.
That's just one little aspect of some of the consequences that it would hit veterans.
Mr. Chairman, I would, if I may, I would say one thing, and that was when we started the budget process. We started several $billions below where we are because we were told that sequester is still a possibility, and it still is a possibility. It is not off the table, and that's something that I think the budgeteers, at least, you know, when I talk to my guys, they always remind me, you know, we do have this thing called sequester. So in defense of the budgeteers, I think they're trying to work with the Congress and find a way to get that. It's a limit, but it can be solved somehow. I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I now recognize gentlewoman, Ms. Edwards from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a really quick question. We spent some time over the last several Congresses really going to bat for the education budget within NASA. Across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, we felt very, very strongly about keeping those within NASA. I noticed that this year's budget request is it's $5 million less than what was enacted in 2016, which is problematic. And what I really notice is that the Minority University Research Education project is down $2 million. I see a plus up in STEM education, and then a significant decrease in the space grants. And I want to speak to the Minority University Research Education because I have been really privileged to see some of the fruits of this labor at Morgan State University, which is conducting some joint research with NASA. I think it is a great way to get this next generation to find these engineers and researchers who are out there, who are minorities, women, other underserved communities. And so this university research education project plays a tremendous role with historically black colleges and universities and underserved and minority populations, and with getting women also engaged in the STEM fields. And so I'm concerned about the decreases. I think this is where the next generation is going to come from, and I'll just let you comment on that.
I share your concern, Congresswoman Edwards. Every year, you know, I have to sign a report on funding for HBCUs, and it's either the same or a little bit less, and so that is troubling. But when we look at funds that are available, so what we've tried to do is we've tried to look at some innovative ways to ensure that we can make HBCUs and minority-serving institutions more competitive. One of the ways is in small business. So whereas most HBCUs and minority-serving institutions today look for grants, we are trying to team them with larger research institutions so that they can learn how to go after contracts, so that they can enter into contracts to allow their professors to actually do, like Congressman Perlmutter knows this, University of Colorado Boulder. Maven is the University of Colorado Boulder. That's the principal investigator, is a professor. This is a critical Mars satellite. We ought to be able to get HBCUs and minority-serving institutions to learn from Colorado Boulder so that they can compete for contracts, so that the students who want to be engineers can actually build satellites. We're starting little. We're starting with small sats or CubeSats. And so while it's not for MUREP or other kinds of programs, we're finding alternative ways to get money to minority campuses. We're not there yet, but we're trying to do that. We call it mentor-protege, where a large college takes a small HBCU and tries to bring them along. Alabama Huntsville, Morgan State, Hampton, they're unusual. They know how to, you know, they have contract offices. Most HBCUs don't even have a clue. And that is not a slight on the HBCU. It's just that they've never known that that's available to them also. And so we've got to spend time doing that. I share your concern. Yeah.
Thank you. Now recognize Mr. Posey from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, just to kind of pick up where we left off last time when I ran out of time, let's suppose that NASA received an extra $1.35 billion in fiscal year 17. What would that get spent on?
first thing would be spent on buying down risk across the board in our programs, and a large portion of it would go into human spaceflight. And what does that mean, buying down risk? We would go out and purchase long lead items for downstream vehicles so that EM3, EM4, EM5 would be able, the vehicles for those flights would be able to begin construction now rather than waiting 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. We would probably put more money into beefing up our safety and mission assurance organization or the engineering organization to make sure that we satisfy Congresswoman Edwards' concern and that of the ASAP, that we don't let launch fever or those kinds of things happen. And of course, we would try to get as much done quickly so that we could launch sooner. But the big focus would be on buying down risk.
Thank you. For a long time, we talked about EM2 being in, excuse me, 2021, and now we're a big bump to 2023. Could just a matter of funding put that back on track?
Yes, a matter of funding could put EM2 back on track, but all the funding would not go to doing that, again, as I said, because what I don't want to do is put a bundle of money on EM2, have no long lead items having been procured, have tests that need to be done and don't get done, and we launch EM2 earlier and we're stopped. So
I get that.
it's not black and white.
And the economy of having more closer together is there too. I mean, I understand the economic benefits of doing that.
Yeah.
So.
You know, a development curve, a funding curve for a development program has a little hump in it. None of ours ever have that. Ours is always straight line.
Yeah.
The work that people like Bob Cabana and Todd May and Ellen Ochoa and the program managers do every single year, Bill Gerstenmaier, in fitting a development program. And we have, I think, 5 human spaceflight development programs underway. Never been done by this agency before. When you talk about commercial crew, commercial cargo, suborbital flight, Orion, SLS, EGS, and not to mention the science programs, we've got a lot of stuff that we're trying to do, and all of it is incredibly valuable. We don't have anything that I would say, you know, let's stop doing it, because it's all important for the nation.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see now the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Byer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, Congress has expressed in the past that, or the concerns have been expressed, that it's not safe to have missile rocket launches and offshore oil rigs in the same area. 2015, NASA stated that the presence of either temporary or fixed structures at or below the sea surface within our range's hazard areas would have significant detrimental effects on our ability to conduct aerospace test activities. In addition, there was a warning, quote, that impact with an oil platform would cause catastrophic damage and would result in the complete loss of expensive launch vehicles. So Tuesday, the administration, Secretary Jewell, reversed course on Mid-Atlantic oil and gas leasing program, at least through 2022. Could you tell us if offshore oil and gas drilling and exploration off Virginia's coast is consistent with the activity of NASA Wallops?
Mr. Byer, I'll take that for the record. I will say one thing about the comment you made. Any spacecraft that impacts anything here on Earth is bad for whether there's an oil well there or not. If it comes back to Earth, it's a bad day. So having an oil well there doesn't make a difference. But I'll take it for the record to find the answer to your specific question.
Okay, good. I was trying to quote NASA there as much as I could.
Yes, sir, and I understand that. I have some incredible people, a lot smarter than I am, and so they're going to educate me so I can answer your question.
Okay. How about a brief progress report on James Webb Telescope? And are we still on track for launch October 2018?
We are on track for launch October 2018, and we actually have, I'll try to get this right, about a 7.5 month cost and schedule reserve, which we, in all probability, will need because there's some critical tests upcoming when we move the spacecraft down to the Johnson Space Center, and there's always something that comes up that you don't anticipate, so it's the place you want to be, but we're on track right now for 2018.
This is very exciting. Yeah, thank you, General. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yes, sir, thank you, and I believe Mr. Perlmutter, the gentleman from Colorado.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I just have a few thank yous I want to give. One is to Scott Kelly and his recent record-setting journey on the space station, and for a short guy like me, it was encouraging to hear that he was 2 inches taller when he came down than his identical twin brother.
Only temporary.
I know, it didn't last long, but still, there's hope. And I want to thank NASA, and yesterday we had another astronaut here testifying, Kathy Sullivan, on behalf of NOAA, and both of your agencies helped my office recently with a major giant weather system, Cyclone Winston, that clobbered Fiji, and we had some constituents who were missing for several days, and we were able to get some pictures from your agency, NOAA, some others, to at least give the family comfort that the part of the island where they were wasn't completely flattened. And after several days, and the communications were restored, but it gave comfort to the family. So I want to thank you for that. Also, thank you with respect to the cargo missions. Recently one of companies in Colorado was awarded one of the contracts to deliver cargo Sierra Nevada up to the space station. And lastly, you mentioned the University of Colorado, and they're playing University of Connecticut today in the first round of the NCAA. So I do want to say go Buffs, but TSIS, Total Solar Irradiance Sensor, is what we met about at CU a couple years ago, built by CU students, and it's going to catch a ride to the space station in 2018. And, obviously very proud of the university and the kinds of things it does working with NASA and the things that it does in terms of getting students involved with outer space. So I don't know if you want to comment on any of those, but just thank you for your service again, Jim.
Sure, Mike, I appreciate all the compliments. I'll try to make sure we get them out to everybody. I'll be with Scott next week when we go to Moscow for his post-flight. But I would go back to Congresswoman Edwards' question about HBCUs and the like and say that's what we want to do with schools like Morgan and Howard and Hampton. We want them to have students who are working on spacecraft, and that takes some effort. And first of all, you have to convince them that they can. You've got to let them know that opportunities are there. We use the term inspire all the time. I had a young black engineer one time who told me, if he heard me say inspire one more time, he's going to puke. And I went, what do you mean? He said, we can't inspire anybody until we inform them. And so there are kids from my community back in South Carolina and all over this country that you all represent who don't have a clue what they can do. And so the first thing, and that's what NASA tries to do with the limited funds we do have in our education program. And I actually have a $19 billion education budget. I know you all think I'm being trite when I say that, because everything we do in NASA is really focused on trying to inspire and inform young people about what they can do to be a part of the NASA family. And so I'm very, very thankful for the $19.3 billion that you all appropriated for us out of the Congress last year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this really concludes our hearing, and it's been an excellent hearing, and I want to thank the witness, General Charlie Bolden, for your long, illustrious career and your leadership of NASA. And I want to thank you on behalf of the entire committee. I'd also like to thank the committee members for their very informative and great questions. So with that, this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, sir.